Hey there, welcome back to the Rooftop Recording video series. Today I'm going to do an entire mix sent to me. I've had people ask about how I approach a mix if it's a song that I didn't track, and it's not really that different from a song that I did track, except there's a little bit more organization and setup needed out front. So the song that we're working on today, I have a friend and musical partner, Tyler Rigdon, who's currently living in New York City, and he's starting to produce tracks there on his own and send them to me to mix and master here in Michigan. We've done a lot of records together and have a pretty good understanding of what I'm going to do and what he needs to be able to send in. So this track is nicely prepared. All the tracks sound good and should be a lot of fun to mix. It's a pop tune from his musical partner from the T-Heads' last record or two, Travis. And the name of the song is called Physical Level, and I've got it uploaded. Tyler sent me his Pro Tools session, the entire session. It was prepped by removing any files that weren't used in the production, and then sent over. He copied the whole thing and sent it via Dropbox. And all I had to do was open it up, and I did import his rough mix so that I can listen to that along with what I'm working on. I like to always hear the rough from the producer. It gives me a good sense of what's important to them and what the focus of the track is, and sort of a target for what I'm going to aim for. I'm going to take his idea of the rough and I'm going to work it and bring it a little more forward, try to highlight any of the parts and any of the beauty that may have just not been made everything that it could possibly be. So without further ado, let's launch right in and check out the rough mix of this track.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing it's been on your phone, and I don't like it, but it's nothing that I control. All the stress and started getting old. Now I'm getting good at drawing lines between me, your spare time, and working on things should change. But now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting and this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, baby, please. I know you're used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. Every time you start talking about the new guy gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Babe, I've heard a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh, please, babe. I know you're used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. You say you're thinking of her.
Okay, so there's a little bit at the end. It's going to be a fade out, I would expect, not a tight ending at the moment. Couple of things. I obviously don't have the rough track lined up with the actual track that we're working on. So I'm going to move that first of all. Usually it's a marker position, but not always. I think in this case it's not. It seems to be a little ahead of that. And you can just check with a little mute, unmute, solo.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing it's been on your
So there we go. We're lined up, and so I know what we're looking for. There's a couple of things I noticed right away listening. The kick drum is kind of punching out right now, detached from the synth bass, and I want to focus those in a little bit more together and make sort of a low-end unit that works really nicely. And the vocal level is not super consistent throughout the track, so those will be the two main things that I'm going to work on, and the rest we'll just sort of take it as it comes. There's a lot of ways to approach mixing, and this is my method. You can take any of this, use it, do it your own way. But for me, I like to listen to each of the sections and hear what there is in the individual tracks. I often do some sort of cleaning and scrubbing of anything that I might interpret as a flaw in a track, like background noise, or if there's any clipping or distortion, or sometimes frequencies that stick out pretty dramatically. I'll take care of those right away because I know that they'll cause a problem with the mix later on. And as far as when to decide to do that and when to leave it until you're listening to everything stacked up, I think it really comes down to how well do you know your speakers and know your process and trust your decision making. Plus, it's Pro Tools. We can undo anything. So let's see what we have here. Oh, actually, before we even get to that, the very first step that I have, and I'm going to show you this on screen, although I'm going to just give you a little hint of what I'm doing, is setting up the tracks and setting up colors. I like to use the colors in a track for identification of the various parts. Now, Tyler and I have worked together enough that he has a good sense already of the color palette that I'm used to using, so I don't have to do a whole lot. Only thing I notice is that his bass color and synth colors are sort of opposite of what I use. I normally use purples for bass and greens for keyboards and synths. Yellows for percussion for me, and brown for acoustic guitars, red for electric guitars, and blues for vocal tracks. So most of that's already set up like I like. I don't have a whole lot to do. Some other things, and people will use a mix template for this. I'm going to show you my mix template approach such as it is, and other people just start from scratch every time. I myself have a few things that I know I'm going to do. When I mix, I use a summing amplifier and I have master outputs set up for each of the outputs on my hardware, feeding into the summing amp so that I know I'm not going to overload anything. It gives me a level meter with a peak indicator that tells me if I'm running out too hot. And also VCAs and effects like drum reverbs. I know I'm going to want a reverb for the drums. It may not be the same reverb that I want for keyboards or vocals or anything else. So I have a setup for drum reverb that I like, and it has like 3 or 4 of my common choices loaded so that I can just pick which one I want and then erase or deactivate the others. And I might not stick to those. I may end up going with something totally different just depending on what the needs of the song are. But it does save me some time to have some of those things set up. So I'm going to show you a little bit of my setup right now. So the reverb level at the beginning, or the reverb track, well, that's not a reverb track. Things that are labeled like this one is, it's just labeled aux. No idea what that is. So I like to make sure the labeling is also clear and easy to get to. So this is the boom plugin, which is what's used for electronic drums. There's no data on it. It was just used for programming and sent out via an aux to create these drum tracks. So I'm just going to hide it. We don't need to see that. I never delete anything because I may want to go back to it for some reason, but I just don't delete it. This next track here, physical level, that's the rough. So I'm going to relabel this physical level rough. I'm going to use that same track when I print a mix. I print by re-recording, which is partially a function of my summing amplifier. I have a dangerous summing amp that I like to use, and instead of bouncing, I re-record. This will probably actually go to my tape machine sitting behind me and then get re-recorded in via that. But either way, I need a track to do that, so that'll stay as my scratch for the rough mix, and then it'll become my print track later. Okay, kick, snare, clap, hi-hat, tom, 80s tom, shaker. Those are all nice and clearly labeled. He's got them all going to a drum bus, except for these 80s tom and shaker are going straight out. I'm not going to change routing right now. Before I do a final mix, I am going to, heck, let's do it. Let's just go with everything right into the summing amplifier the way that I normally would do it. Oh yeah, inputs and outputs come in from his session, not from my standard. So we're going to come here to our I/O setup. I'm going to click default, which loads in everything from my system as it normally is, and then it maintains at the bottom his busing and specific assignments to this session, which is all great. I'm going to take a couple of these out. I'm going to take the Pro Tools monitoring out because we don't need those for mixing. Oops. Delete those paths, and there we go. Now I see he's got some that are not labeled in the busing. I like to keep all of that labeled, but we'll deal with that later. So drum bus, here's a change I'm going to make. He's got a compressor going here, which I don't have. Pro compressor. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be something, probably not that same one anyway. But I'm going to take all of these and change the assignments to the outputs as I normally use them. My output number 1 is normally kick. Output number 2 is snare. And then I take everything else for the drums and go to 3 and 4. But my drum parallel bus gets its own separate output. Now, all of these tracks I'm going to set up on my sends, a drum bus send. And with the option shift, you can select all of these selections that I've made, shaker through kick. That's a hold shift and click beginning and end. And then shift and option, if I click that fader, it just changed every single one of these up to unity gain. Saves a lot of time. They're all set up to feed the drum bus. They're following the main pan. They are post fader, so whatever I do here is going to affect that bus. It's going to send my entire drum signal out to the drum bus, basic parallel compression sort of setup. And there's a number of compressors that I like for the drum bus. API 2500 is really good. An 1176 can be good. A Fairchild 660 or 670 can be great. However, for this track, I think, just from listening to the rough, I'm going to want something that's got some real punch and attack. This is a modern sounding track, and I really love the 33609 Neve compressor. Diode bridge compressors. I have a hardware diode bridge compressor, but I like the repeatability of the UA plugin. Sounds great. And for drums, I normally go with a slightly higher ratio and a very fast release because we're doing a parallel. And I'm just going to get a level basically set for that right now. Let's see, we have a drum group, and it is missing 80s tom and shaker. So right-click, modify, add. Now we have a drum group with everything. Let's hear what's going on with these drums. Pull that compressor up. That setting will work fine for the drum compression just to get started. Let's listen to a couple of these soloed. Nice strong kick tone. That's a fun sound. Okay, that's great. There's very little to do to these drums as far as the basic tones go. I'm not going to do anything in advance, but I did not yet do coloring, and we have got some other stuff to go through here. So purples for the bass. This instrument 2 track is, that's another synth. We'll just hide that away. And then we've got keys upon keys. What have we got here? A couple of buses that are not used. Okay, if this is not even used and there's nothing there, those tracks we're going to get rid of. Might have been useful for tracking, not needed for now. Okay, so synths in green. We've got a key bus that is set up and going. We've got acoustics, we've got electric guitars backwards. These are all nicely labeled. I don't even have to change any of that. Reverb. I make my reverbs in all aux tracks, all bus groups, all uncolored, which a bunch of these already are. Here's another unnecessary track. What's this? There's nothing there at all. Get rid of that. And yeah, that can go with no color. So we've got a few different reverbs, it seems. We do have a drum verb, drum bus, key bus, and standard reverbs. I have started putting my reverbs at the beginning of the track, and that for me is a matter of UAD plugins. There's a reverb that I love, the Capital Chambers. It's pretty system intensive, and if the reverb is at the end of the track, the end of the session, and I load a session up, a lot of times it will disable that because of a load idiosyncrasy with UAD. So I just move them to the front, and it's not a problem. Got a couple more vocal-specific tracks here that we will keep blank. I leave my masters with that color. Now I make my lead vocal the brightest blue. And then everything else gets a shade or two darker than that. Now, I'm okay with these being slightly different shades of blue because, well, it's easier to tell them apart that way by group. And it looks like, for the most part, I like to have my clips and my tracks all the same color. Makes it easier for me to see throughout the whole session, but it looks like everything is okay. And the grouping seems pretty logical to the arrangement. I'll put my lead vocal first just so I can see it. Now, as far as my output routing, this is, again, my way. It's not everybody's way. It's just a way. My master reverb goes to this output here. What's this clip 1? Oh, yeah. That's my capture track for the video. We'll leave that there. And, okay. So, drums are set up. Bass. Bass for me, I see we've got some panned bass. That's an unusual thing. I don't normally pan bass. And these are just a couple of momentary drop-ins. Let's see what's going on with these. Okay, that doesn't sound like a bass. That's more like a synth to me. And that's fine, but we're just going to regroup that. And let's see here at the end what this last bass part is. Oh yeah, also more synth than bass. Might have been cut from a bass patch, but it's a high frequency thing. So we'll reposition those. And oops. So we're going to just take these, turn them green as well. And I'll go a darker green since they started as bass. And we'll deal with those as part of the synth tracks, not the bass tracks. So as far as routing goes, my basses normally go to out number 15, which I have set mono on my summing amplifier, so the bass is going to be dead center. And I'll set both of those to 15. So we have two different actual bass sounds, and that's fine. So all of the synths are going to go together to 7 and 8. My next open track, oh yeah, drum verb needs to get assigned along with the parallel. And we have this key bus, which doesn't look like there was any processing happening here. So I'm going to rename this. I tend to call these things MASH. New York compression, parallel compression, MASH. I've heard it called all these things. The first guy who showed me that, Alex Johnson, who runs the Ann Arbor Celine School of Music, School of Rock. I forget exactly what it's called. I'm sorry, Alex. But he called it a MASH, so I call it a MASH. There you go. And might as well get that set up. I don't always use these, but if I am going to use it, might as well stick it up there and throw something on it just to see how it sounds. These are probably going to need something pretty firm. I'm going to go with an 1176 because it's very fast, a really powerful compressor. And I have no idea what that setting's like. I'm turning that track down. We'll deal with that later. Acoustics. I'll give these their own separate output. Those will go to 9 and 10. All of these electric guitars will go to 11 and 12. And in this case, the parallels are also going to go to the same. Yeah, likewise here on this, that's going to go to 7 and 8. I might end up using a parallel for the acoustics, but I'll have to set that up later if I do. Okay, so lead vocal, my main lead vocal is going to go to 16. It gets its own track, its own output, set mono, dead center, right in the middle of the mix. All the rest of these vocal tracks go to 13 and 14. And that sets all 16 of my outputs. Vocal verb is going to also go... No, actually I'm going to take these and send these to my reverb send, which is from my second interface. I'll move these to the front just in case I use something different. And I see we have vocal verb, vocal delay. We don't have vocal delay set up on any of these. Might want some, I don't know. I'm just going to have it set up now. I like to have everything configured before I actually start with the mixing. I want to not have to worry too much about routing. So, reverb. So these are all going right now. Pretty hot levels as well. That's going to probably end up changing. But for the time being, I'm not worried about it. We will make sure there's reverb on all of these set up, ready to be used. Likewise, everything through here could get reverb. It could also end up with delay on any of those. So, I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to go all the way through here, not the auxiliary send, and get all these set up to go to my delay. Currently it's called vocal delay, but this could end up changing it. But I want to have them all set up and ready. Just ready to go just in case. So I don't have my drum verbs set up except on the clap. And I may end up wanting some verb on these. So again, we're going to send drum verb. Have it set up for all those. I won't use any delay on the drums. That would be a very unusual special effect. The parallel compression bus does get drum verb send on it. I'll keep that sort of similar to everything else. Yep, those are good. Okay, so I think all of my routing is set. Now, this master will not be used. I'm going to take that out. Now, for a template, I don't currently have a single template that I use and this is it for everything. Very often what I do is I go to the last tune that I was mixing and import those elements, VCAs and master outputs from there because it's just a time saver. I know it was what I last used. These things are changing constantly. I don't like to take the time to have to set up a template and save it and modify it. That's just extra work that I don't have to do. Okay, this is not a good project to use because that was a specific thing. Let's go to the other tune for this project because that had all my settings. Okay, so looking through my source tracks here, I've got an intro VCA. The other song had a separate intro. Don't need that. I do want a drum VCA, acoustic VCA, why not? We've got electric guitar VCA. We've got, oh, I don't have a key VCA. That's a problem. Well, let's pull that intro in and I'll just rename it. Rename it and reassign it. And we had no vocal VCA. Okay, so we're going to have a little work to do. And it looks like my masters were not yet set up either. That's a problem. But not a big problem. Okay, try this again. Oh, that's because I was looking at the wrong thing. There was a key VCA, and there was a vocal VCA. I normally save these as a new file. Every time I start working on it, it gets saved as a new file. And I looked at the original, not the new file. So it wasn't complete. But import all of those. And since these are all masters and VCAs, it doesn't matter if I import what specific data. I'm just importing the tracks. The tracks are there. You can see I have some limiters set up here, just brick wall limiters, making sure I don't overload. I typically will bypass all of these. Actually, it would be make inactive. And I'll only turn them on if I'm into the red and too deep into my mix to do it any other way. Okay, so let's get some of these VCAs put where they gotta go. I end a section of the mix with a VCA, and I don't have groups yet set up for these. These require a group to trigger. So all these drum tracks I'm going to group, and we're going to call it drum VCA, and set that up. And now that gives me master solo control over all of those tracks, and that's good to go. So I'm going to make a bass VCA over top of this intro VCA because we have multiple bass tracks. Bass VCA, and that gets assigned. I like that bright purple for my VCAs. It makes it nice and easy for me to find while shuffling through the mix. Okay, what do we got here next? Keys. Keys VCA. Keys VCA. And we've got all of those tracks, which will be key VCA. Acoustic VCA, electric VCA. Thrilling watching people set this stuff up. This is part of the reason I like to get it all out of the way is it's just not interesting, creative, or adding to the whole flow of this thing in any way to have to do this configuring. So I just like to get it done and out of the way. That's a lot of vocal tracks. Pop production, lots of vocals. Okay, so now, final setup for me. My setup, I have two of these artist mix control units, and I like to have masters set up here on these faders. One of the beautiful things about having a control surface is it lets you get to things faster, whether or not I'm on the correct Pro Tools screen. So we have this EU control, and I can assign here drum VCA, bass VCA. So all of my master controls, key VCA, acoustics, electric guitar, where is it? There it is, named wrong. And after the electrics, it goes right into vocals. Along with all of those masters, I also always put my lead vocal, and I may eventually add any other solo voices there. So those are up on this control surface all the time. The other one I'm going to put there now to finish the first bank of 8. Actually, I'm not going to do it because of the video and the recapture that I have to do for the sake of audio. But normally I would put my mix track there so that I could listen to the rough, go back to the rough, or often I'll put separate alternate takes playlists with comp mixes, comp tunes to listen to just to hear how those mixes are versus mine. We're going to skip that for this particular project just because of having to recapture the audio directly off the Pro Tools system for what I'm playing. And if anybody knows a better way to do these video captures, please get in touch with me and let me know. The video is not my expertise. I'm an audio guy. Okay, so now if I solo up a VCA here, it cancels out everything else. Everything seems to be working right. Oops, that one's not. That is the mash, not the VCA. So let's fix that. Key VCA. There we go. Acoustic VCA. Electric VCA. And vocal VCA, lead vocal. There we go. Okay, so everything is set. Drums sounded good. Let's just listen to the whole mix where it sets right now. I'm gonna cue it up at the top and let this roll on through.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing you playing on your phone, and I don't like it, but it's nothing that I control. All the stress inside of me. No, now I'm getting to drawing lines to me. I spare time and working on things. Now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting, this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, I know you used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings that settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. Every time you start talking about the new guy, gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Babe, I've learned a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh, please, babe. I know you used to act so special. Just me, you, and these feelings that settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. Just say you're thinking over
few things going on I'm noticing that I want to work on. Vocal levels, again, a little inaccurate, little inconsistent. There's this passage right here, which on the vocal tracks, the lead vocal jumps to not the lead vocal track. Or maybe that wasn't the section, because there is a lead vocal there.
Every time you start talking about the new guy gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Babe, I've learned a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just...
Oh yeah, it's not that it's on the wrong track, it's just that it gets a lot quieter. So let's look at this track here. Yeah, pretty significant differences from there to there and such. So there's a lot of ways to deal with this. Smash it with a compressor, run a limiter. But I think what I'm going to do instead is do a little bit of clip gain just to balance these out. And yep, I'm just eyeballing it on the meters here, which is really, I think, plenty effective. We'll go and listen to this in a minute. My plan for the lead vocal, as I very often do, is I'm going to reprocess this entire vocal track through some of my hardware. I know a lot of online mix courses just show software because they can actually show you on screen easily what they're doing. But I think in the real world, if you have good hardware, you should use it. Sometimes that means running through it and recapturing. Other times, patching it in on a patch bay and letting it mix through it. But for me, my current working process, and this has changed in recent years even, is I'm going to take this track and send the whole thing out to hardware. So I've got it in the ballpark as far as the waveform matching. It's right in there. So what I'm going to send it to is I have these Warm Audio WA73s. It's their clone of a Neve 1073, which is a classic piece of vocal processor. And I'm also using a Warm Audio WA76. The 1073 into an 1176 is a classic vocal chain, very often followed by or used in conjunction with an LA2A. That I'm going to use software because I don't own the hardware currently. And I'm going to pause here and move the camera and show you what I'm doing with the hardware, just so you can see how this part of my process works. Okay, it's a funny angle, but this is the best I've got. So the way my system is set up, I have a patch bay here, which allows me to route signal out of my audio interface into any of this other gear and back in. So I'm going to set up right now out of my channel 16 into this WA73, and then out of that WA73 into my WA76 compressor, and grab another cable here, and out of the WA76 back into 16. This lets me monitor in line, and then I'm going to end up recapturing where I will come out of the summing amplifier back into my audio interface where I will re-record it on a fresh track. So let's see how this sounds. I'm going to reset the camera again. Okay, so time to listen to a little bit of this vocal track. I'm going to listen to this in context of the track and make some adjustments as we go. This was used for the same function yesterday, so probably the settings are pretty close. I see here in the software there's a de-esser and there's an EQ. I'm going to bypass both of these and listen to what we've got just on the raw track first. And I'm going to listen now in context and tweak away with the compressor and see if I can get to something I like.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing who's been on your phone, and I don't like it, but it's nothing that I control. All the stressing started getting old. Now I'm getting good at drawing lines between me, your spare time, and working on things should change. But now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting, and this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, baby, please. I know you used to acting so special.
EQ out.
Just me, you,
EQ
and
in.
these feelings to settle. So let's get this back
It's
to
pretty subtle, but a little extra
level,
brightness.
baby.
Got a lot of
Only
compression
know
right now.
Trust, and we can handle.
I like that solo synth. It reminds me of a violin a little bit.
Every time you start talking about the new guy, gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Well, babe, I've learned a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh, please, baby. I know you used to acting so special. Just me, you.
Okay, it's not really fair that you can't see the compressor as I'm doing this, but what I'm adjusting on the compressor is the quieter passages. I don't want to see the needle move much. A little bit is okay, but what I really want to do is as soon as you start singing anything louder, I want it to pull that back. This is not doing the whole job of leveling the vocal out, but it's going to get it pretty darn close, and it's going to help me start to tame some of those loudest peaks. I'm using a 4-to-1 ratio. My attack is at 12 noon, my release is as fast as possible. So this is really just working as a limiter, which is what they call an 1176. It can be more subtle if I go to a slower attack and a slower release, but relatively faster attack and fast release, it's just knocking off some limits for me. So my method for this is now I'm going to run this down to a track, and I name this for what it is with a letter R, which means I've rendered this to a new piece of audio. So set this up for the proper input, arm it to record, and I'm going to run that down, and we'll do that off screen. Okay, so I've recaptured the lead vocal. Now, one very important thing if you're dealing with external hardware and recapturing, and that is phase cohesion, timing issues. Any sort of latency on the system and your recapture is going to be late compared to the original track. So if I zoom this way in, I usually look for something very sort of telltale in the sake of a transient. There's a good spot right there that you can really see what's going on. And I zoom way in and blow up this wave. So we've got a peak here and a peak there. Those have to correspond to each other and line up. So I'm going to drop a marker right at the bottom of that. And then I'm going to grab this right at the very bottom of that. And get that lined up. Drag it over there. Now it's exactly lined up. However, I do believe I didn't select all. Let's do that again. Got to select all the clips and drag that over. And now those two waves match up perfectly. I don't want to change the timing of the performance. I don't want anything to go out of phase should there have been multiple open mics. And now I'm going to take this and just create a new track, or a new take anyway. And I'm going to call that lead vocal and put an R after it. So that's now the render track, and I can slide that clip up and this can go away. Just delete that track right out of the session, not needed. And now I have a processed vocal track, and you can see in the waveform it's still dynamic but a lot more even. And now let's look at the de-esser and whether or not we need that.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing who's been on your phone, and I don't like it.
Okay, so that de-esser is definitely taking more than I want. I have a different de-esser I like. It's a Waves de-esser. They gave this away free when it was first introduced, which is really cool. But it's this organic resynthesis process, and I don't exactly know how it works or what it does differently, but I do know that this de-esser works pretty gently and pretty effectively.
But it's nothing that I control. All the stressing started getting old.
On this
Now I'm getting good
on this indicator, exactly where it's kicking on.
Spare time and working on things should change. But now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting and this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, baby, please.
And that's fine. It doesn't need a lot of it, but I just want to get some of that harshness taken out on the end. And I'm going to replace all these de-essers with that same thing, and we'll double check the settings later on. You don't even need to see me do that on camera. You just, you want the S's taken down. If it's an audible problem, we'll revisit it. So that's a little something better on the vocals. Haven't done anything on the reverbs yet. Haven't done anything on the individual track components yet, but that was a bit of an issue. Now let's listen a bit to the bass and drums. I want to hear what's going on with the unit there on the low end and see what I got to do. I might reprocess some of those tracks back through some of my hardware as well. Let's see what we got. Okay, so I turned off the EQ. All it was doing was adding an extra low frequency, which I'm going to check those on the speakers later with the subwoofer to see exactly what's going on. I don't trust headphones for that, but I'm going to switch this EQ out since it wasn't doing a whole lot where it sat. And I really like the FabFilter Pro Q because of the built-in spectrograph. You can see what's going on. Helps you narrow in on frequencies faster. I know where the problems are I'm looking for by what I hear, but having that visual tool is a great thing. One of my mentors, Jeff Michael from Big Sky, used to say, don't let your eyes be the ears of sound. And I think he took that from Bruce Swedien, who he had done some work for automating some of his Harrison consoles. And it's a really great quote. But whoever said it originally, wherever it came from, I definitely believe it. However, you can let your eyes use the tools. People have been doing that forever, from VU meters to oscilloscopes back in the old days, so might as well use what we've got. And I see we had a Fairchild that is a plugin I don't have, that specific one on the snare drum. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to take it off. And a graphic EQ on the floor tom. I wonder what that was doing. We do have a pitch shifter, and that is dropping it down 3 semitones. Now, you can do that right in Boom, but for whatever reason that was done after it was recorded. And my favorite thing about the AT&T phone, political call. I don't need a political call while I'm working. Thank you. I have another plugin that might work better than that pitch shifter as well, but I'm not going to mess with that right now. Well, got some EQing on the tom. That all looks pretty sensible. We'll leave that in place. And I want to hear a little more of this. I'm going to listen to the speakers for a minute. There's a lot of low end when I listen in the room with the subwoofer. We're going to sculpt some of that out of the kick. Nice bass line. Okay, I do very often like to hear bass a little further back. Low frequencies take some physical distance to develop, so I don't know when I'm sitting here exactly what the low end is going to do if it was played in a club, for instance. So if I go back a few feet, and I've done some measurements on this, and back just about right here, that's next to my piano. That's almost exactly halfway down the distance in my room, and there's a node there, and I have a big bass buildup, which is really helpful for me on the low end of knowing, like, if it's in a rumbly space, what's going to be too much, what's going to be enough. And you have to know your room. For me, that's one of the spots. It's not the only place I judge bass from, but it's a good beginning. And that, to me, feels a lot more balanced. I brought the hi-hat up a little bit. Let's see what's going on with the snare. We'll listen on a little more. Okay, it's reverb time on the drum set, and to me, that feels too big. I want something a little tighter, a little roomier, and I hope that Tyler and Trav like this one. But I'm going to load up this is the Waves IRL. I have the full version where I can create my own samples as well. And if you have only the IRL, you should go on Waves' website and download their whole sample library. It's like 4 gigabytes or more of samples of various spaces, and it will do a lot more for you than just what the basic 4 samples that come with the plugin do. And they're all free. Waves will give them to you. You just have to go find them. So the Cello Recording Studio drum position Omni sample I really like for drum reverbs. It's not super big, but it's a nice roomy space. And let's see here. Go up here where there's some more snare drum. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take this snare and process it a little bit. I think it could use a bit more pop right on the top. So I'm not going to bother reprocessing this through hardware. It doesn't need it, frankly. And I'm just going to add a little more snap up at the highest frequency and the top end on this 1073. Filter out a little bit of lows just to free up some room on the bottom. And let's see how that goes.
Let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust.
Okay, so yeah, a little more bite on the snare drum. And so one of the things I did right there, you may have noticed, was I grabbed that high EQ and I cranked it up. Same with the mid-range. I cranked it and pulled it back. It's just a nice level setting technique. You can do this on a main fader or an EQ slider or whatever it may be. Start boosting when you find the frequency that sounds good to your ear, and you just boost and boost, and then when you hear, oh, that's too much, you come back. And then when it seems right, maybe go until it's not enough. And then when you decide it's not enough and you know that's not enough and that's too much, you've got a good range right in the middle where you're going to put it. It's a really good way to make these decisions quickly and not obsess for hours on end about what the exact right level of high end for the snare drum is. Go too much, go too little, find it in the middle, and you're done. So drums are sounding pretty good to me right now, all in all. Let's give it one more listen through. I'm just going to hit some of these balances a little more. We'll start right about there.
Good at drawing lines between me, your spare time, and working on things should change. But now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting and this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, baby, please. I know you used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle.
Okay, let's hear the shaker.
I know you used to acting so special. These feelings to settle. So let's get this back to physical.
Okay, the shaker to me sounds not exactly settled in. Put a compressor on this one. Waves NV2 is really good if you just don't need to get too crazy about it, but you just want to smush something down. One level to pull down the tops, one level to boost the bottoms, output adjuster, which to me, usually I end up pulling the output down about as much as I've pulled the high level down. And let's see how that sets in. There's the shaker track again.
Let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. It won't hurt him, but he don't see. Just gonna you with your hands on me. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle.
Okay, that sounded good to me. And yeah, that compressor works well. It's just holding it in there and letting me ride it quiet but present. Happy with how that's working on the drums. I'm happy with how the bass is sounding just where it sits. I do notice there was a compressor on there. Not really myself hearing a whole lot of troubled variation in the bass. Let's look at that a little closer though, because we do have two bass tracks.
I know you.
Love that line.
Every time you start talking about the new guy, gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Well, babe, I've learned a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh,
Okay, there's a little bit of a thing on bass sometimes that if you've got two things both working in that low frequency, they can get in each other's way. So I don't think compression is really what it needs so much, but I am going to do a little bit of frequency balancing here, and I'm going to pull some of the low end out of this second bass so that the fundamental, the deepest bottom, is all via the synth. So I'm going to roll that off at like 100 or so and a gentle slope and just see if that frees up some of that low end to get carried on by the synth bass.
Let's get this back to the physical level, baby. One we know we can trust, and we can handle. You'll say you'll think it over, but then you never leave. It's 4 a.m. and now you're asking for apologies. I'm not sorry, keeping you up all night. If I'm good at keeping you satisfied, soft talk.
Okay, we are going to need some compression on this. There's a couple of spots where the bass really jumps, and that's going to be too much. Whoa, yeah, look at that. All right, so I'm going to do this with software, and if that doesn't sound good enough, we'll move to the world of hardware. I'm going to go back to the 33609 on this because it's pretty fast and firm, but it'll still allow some of that feel through. So we're going to go quite hard. You know what? Actually, we're going to start with the limiter. And I'm going to jump right to this section here and see just exactly where this is going. And this can be done in solo. It doesn't need to be done in the mix necessarily. So it's barely kicking in through this section. Just a little bit, a couple of dB of compression there, but we're going to get to this section coming up and it's going to slam and hold that in check. Let's hear that in the whole mix.
Every time you start talking about the new guy gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Well, babe, I've learned a few things I think you appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh, please, baby, I know you used to acting so special.
Much more even, that's the idea. So, yeah, we're good on those. Let's hear what else we have going on.
Back to the physical level, baby.
Okay, so we've got a key part, which is really, it's labeled keys, but really what this is a Rhodes. And right now, that's a pretty key part. It's the only thing that goes all the way through the tune. It's recorded in mono, and it sounds like there's a little bit of chorus on it, I believe. Let's see here. Yeah, that sounds like a chorusy keyboard part. I'm going to add a little stereo spread to it. There's a bunch of things that I can do for that. I'm going to go with something fairly subtle. Let's see here, modulation. I could use just a doubler to spread it out. Well, let's go with this guy. Mono to stereo effects. Any of these things let you sort of drive things into stereo mode, and that's the point of the mono stereo, is it'll take a mono track and let you push it into stereo. You'll see now we've got 2 faders, and it's important if you're doing a part of the mix where you're moving from mono to stereo not to destroy your mono image. Most phones are going to play in mono even if it says stereo and the speakers are right by each other. So it's going to work like mono. So you do want to check mono quite often. I have on my monitor controller a mono button that I can use to listen. But that works fine, and it's not too thick or too modulated of a stereoizer, the real ADT that's a Waves plugin. Let's see what else we've got going with keys here. Oops, why am I? Arpeggio. Solo track, and then only one other thing. Cool. Steel guitar. Don't know where that came from. Nice. So we've got all those identified. There's a trick I want to do here. That arpeggio tone, I've got the other mix on this project Tyler sent to me, and it had a auto panner set up on a synth track that was doing something similar in the mix, and I think this could use the same sort of treatment. If I can find where my auto panner plugin went. I know I have it. There we go, auto pan. I'm going to set this pretty slow, so we have a rate here, which I'm going to slow down. I don't really want it entirely linked to the tempo. That's unclicked. I just want it to move, and I don't want it to be super wide either. But I just want to give that arpeggio a little bit of motion. And yeah, triggers, all that stuff is fine. Let's take a look at a section with the arpeggio and see what's going on there. that steel feels a little bit bright to me. Ooh, look at that. There's already a lot of brightness taken out of it. Yeah, this might be a case. I'll make that inactive for a second. There was a 670 on it too. So I'm going to look at this on the fab filter and see what's going on there. One moment of steel. Anytime there's something that drops in for just 1 second, I definitely want that to be heard and an integral part of what's happening. Okay, dynamic EQ, that lets me pull down that steel only when the bright part gets too bright, and that's going to really do a lot to help that sit in the track. So that's probably good to start with. I'm not hearing the acoustics much, and I realize they only come in, not very much at all. Again, sort of a highlight thing, I think, if it's only coming in at a couple of spots. So let's see what's happening here. We've got one moment of stereo and everything else is mono. We've got a Pultec EQ, adding some bottom end, and then taking out some lower bottom end, taking out some extreme highs. Let's hear that without first, and then we'll turn it back on. And I see on the panning we've got this new acoustic off to the side and the first one not. I can pretty well bet when they are together I'm going to want that to balance out the other way. So I'm going to automate that. Okay, so just a little more high end and brought it up in the mix some from where it started, and I think that's okay. So we got a bunch of electric guitars. Let's see what's happening with those. Got some stabs out front, it seems, some backwards guitars, some harmonized stuff. Electric 1, electric 2, and harmony. Wow, those are totally killed with the compressor right now. I like the idea, but I think we're going to soften that up just a smidgen. This is a legacy version of an 1176, and they're okay, but the full versions, if you pay the extra, they're a little more harmonically rich. So that's the SE. Let's go with the revision A full version. This has got a little more grit to it, and I think it'll work nicely. I also wanted a little more attack on that guitar. Okay, so that setting seems all right to begin with. I'm just going to drop this on all 4 of those tracks that had that compression on it. And then, let's see, do they all play at once? They do at the end. Let's listen to this part. Okay, so to me that's setting in there. It's got a nice attack and punch to it, but it's generally that compressed guitar sound that we started with. Let's see what this little thing at the beginning is. I'll solo these up. Okay, just a quick momentary strum. Let's listen to that in context. Okay, so that's great. All good with that. It's setting in there and we get a moment of highlight. Let's hear what's happening with these guitars. Okay, I heard a little bit of distortion on that second guitar on that loud chord. Let's see what's going on there. Distortion on guitars is not always bad. Ah, there we go. We've got some clipped edges. So, not sure why or how that happened. Not a big deal. Something to be aware of. It's there. And I'm going to lock these main tracks and their room tracks together for level. That way I have solo together and I can adjust levels together. I do often like to move the room opposite of the main track, and also I'll put reverb only on the room, which to me just sounds a little more natural and keeps the room sound and reverb sound detached from the main guitar. And let's see here, where are we at? I got big. Okay, we'll listen to this for a minute. Okay, in this section here as well. Okay, this is a perfect chance for parallel compression. All of these guitar parts right now, they're not exactly sitting level in the track where I want them. So I'm going to take all of the guitar parts and send them all to the electric guitar bus. Option Shift to set those all to unity gain. They're all going there. And classic compressor for guitars is a LA3A. I'm going to use the CLA Waves plugin. It's a little grungy compared to some of the other ones. It's maybe not quite as detailed and smooth, but it's a guitar bus. That's okay. Let's see where we're at here. Here's the bus off. Okay, I'm hearing all those guitar parts now nice and clearly. They're not getting in the way of anything else. I might adjust them still with the overall VCA. They'll all adjust, and the parallel compression will adjust. But the blend is good. Overall level may still be to be determined, which means it's time for vocals, and that might be a little bit of a task. So, oh yeah, look at that. We got all kinds of stuff that's up and peaked. Some by not much, some by a lot. Some of these things can be transient effects during mixing if I boost something way up. But better safe than sorry. I'm going to activate these compressors on all of those tracks and see where we set. If those levels get up to negative 0.1, I know they're all the way up. And that in and of itself may not be a problem. But best to avoid cutting off any headroom if possible. Okay, so I am going to set up a vocal parallel stereo aux. I believe, actually, I have a preset for this under track presets, rooftop, drum mash, but that'll work. So that, oh, look at that, it's not saved with the proper color. We're going to rename this, and we're going to change this. Let's see here, we have vocal verb, vocal delay. We're going to use 2324. And I always name all of my buses and all of my ins and outs, just so there's no question what went where or if I've already used something. And now all of my backing vocals, not my lead vocal, but all of my other vocals, I'm going to send to that aux. All right, and double checking I don't have anything else assigned there already. Ooh, how'd you get out of place? Now, I'm just going to listen to some vocals here for a minute. I don't think we're going to need this EQ anymore. We have some other pretty serious EQs happening here. Let's listen just to some vocals.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing who's been on your phone, and I don't like it, but it's nothing that I control. All the stressing started getting old. Now I'm getting good at drawing lines between me, your spare time.
Okay, I gotta figure out why those are not, oh, I have not overrid the solo on them. So solo override leaves all your auxes open when things are soloed out. Very important for reverb tracks to have those enabled. Oh, look at that. I had a guitar bus going. Guess we'll get rid of that. There wasn't anything on it. And all of your auxes should really be solo overridden so they stay open. You want to hear that stuff when you hit a solo. So solo up that, and we'll try that again.
Hear me out, darling. I've been hearing who's been on your phone, and I don't like it, but it's nothing that I control.
Oh, I have no reverb going on the vocal. There was a revibe, don't know what that was, but I don't have it. Let's load up. I think the chamber may sound better on this than the plate, so we're going to take the Capitol chambers, and Capitol chambers from the Capitol Studios in Hollywood. Al Schmidt is probably their longest serving, most famous, well-respected engineer. He has a preset called The One. He knows these chambers. I am going to turn some pre-delay on. I am going to filter out some low end. These are just things I do by default to make reverb sit in a track really nicely. Pre-delay can change depending on the tempo of the song. A ballad, it could go a lot longer. I'm going to stay fairly short, but just enough to separate that reverb from the direct dry signal. I'm not going to mess with any of the other EQs. I'm not going to mess with any of the other settings. We're just going to leave them as Al Schmidt says they should be, because he's the man and he knows. Look at that. We have some additional filtering here. The Abbey Road trick, so to speak. Nicely done, Tyler, but I'm going to turn that off for now. We may want it, but hear it without first.
All the stressing started getting
There's some reverb.
old. Now I'm getting good at drawing.
So on my control surface, there's a really nice feature for this, which I'm going to jump back over to the EU control. This layout here is going to get saved, and we're going to call it VCA Masters. Store that, and I'm going to go back to, actually before that, I'm going to recall a blank, which wipes that out and gives me all the faders where they sit. Now I'm going to go back to assign, and I'm going to set up a group for all vocals. Let's see here on my list, where is that first lead vocal? And then we're going to save this as another layout, and we're going to call it vocals. Okay, so now I have all of my vocals across my faders. It's a lot easier, and I can pull up auxiliary sends, vocal reverb comes up, and then I can do a flip function, and all of these faders become my reverb levels. That's a lot of reverb level going on right now. And I do my returns at unity gain, and I keep my sends lower. Seems like a good general way to go, and for that sort of gain structure, 15 or 16 is sort of a moderate low amount of reverb to put on a track, and I'm just going to set them all right in that range to start with, and then we'll fine tune. But let's see, back to Pro Tools. Let's see where we're at with these vocals here.
Lines between me, you spare time and working on things should
It's a good spot to start.
But now I need a little more. This tension that I've been getting and this feeling I've been going insane. Oh, baby, please. I know you're used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby.
Okay, we have this low vocal part that's hand off to the side. And bass frequencies in the side were always a no-no in the days of records because they could make your needle skip. And I seem to just like things low frequency to be focused more in the middle of the mix as opposed to spread to the side. So I'm going to bring that in and see where we sit.
Every time you start talking about the new guy gets me bored and I end up tuning out. Well, babe, I've learned a few things I think you'd appreciate. Don't let this history just go to waste. Oh, please, baby. I know you're used to acting so special. Just me, you, and these feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. You say you'll think it over, but then you never leave. It's 4 a.m. and now you're asking for apologies. I'm not sorry for keeping you up all night. If I'm good at keeping you satisfied. Soft talk, sweet sentimental. Just me, you, and feelings to settle. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle. It won't hurt him what he don't see. Just alright with your hands on me. So let's get this back to a physical level, baby. One we know we can trust and we can handle.
Okay, so some of those vocals at the end were getting swallowed. There was another vocal track that was not speaking out quite like it should. Oh, I bet it's on this low vocal track right here. So I think we need a little more compression on some of these, and we're going to have to balance some of these out. Some of these things I like to do under clip gain because it's going to feed the front end of the compressor better. Like I can see that track there, it was really quiet. I'm just going to bring it up to where it's better balanced. If it's out of balance, I can go and adjust it later, but I wanted to start pretty close. So it seems I missed setting this one up on my my template under the Yukon control. Okay, so I've just looked at my files that I've been recording and realized that this video is getting very long. We're going to call this the end of part 1, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and finish up part 2, which will be dealing with these vocal tracks and finishing up the polish on the mix, setting the overall levels. I'll show you a little bit about my master bus processing and how I finalized the mix, and call it a wrap at that. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe, give me a thumbs up, like on the video, hit the notification bell, and thank you once again for watching Rooftop Recordings video series.